coffee mug trembled in my hand as I placed it on table 7, avoiding eye contact with the impatient businessman checking his watch for the 3rd time. My stomach growled, a painful reminder that I hadn't eaten since yesterday's dinner shift. 6 more hours to go, and the small container of leftover pasta in the break room fridge was the only thing keeping me going. Ella, table 12 needs water, and 9's been waiting on their check for 10 minutes. Margot's voice cut through the clatter of the busy lunch rush at Bellini's, the Italian restaurant where I'd been waitressing for the past 8 months. I'm on it, I called back, tucking a strand of dark hair behind my ear, feeling it escape from my hasty ponytail. The truth was, I was drowning. Drowning in late rent notices, in medical bills for my little sister's asthma treatments, in the exhaustion that seemed to have permanently settled into my bones at 25. Boston winters were brutal, and this one had stretched my already thin resources to the breaking point. I hurried past the large windows that faced the upscale neighborhood of North End, the weak February sunlight doing little to warm the restaurant. The lunch crowd at Bellini's consisted mainly of business people and wealthy locals who could afford $20 pasta dishes without blinking. That's when I first noticed him, the old man sitting alone by the window. He hadn't been assigned to my section, but something about him caught my attention. Unlike our usual patrons in their sleek business attire, he wore a worn gray coat and stared out the window with an expression of such profound sadness that it made my own troubles momentarily recede. When I passed his table again, I noticed he had only ordered a cup of tea. No food. His weathered hands, marked with age spots, wrapped around the ceramic cup as if seeking warmth more than refreshment. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" I asked, even though he wasn't my table. He looked up, startled, as if he'd forgotten where he was. His eyes were a striking blue, bright against his olive skin, and there was something dignified about him despite his simple clothes. "No, thank you, dear." His accent was thick. Italian, maybe. "This is fine." I nodded and continued with my duties, but my eyes kept drifting back to him. He reminded me of my grandfather before cancer took him 3 years ago. The same proud posture despite apparent hardship. When I went to the break room to grab my lunch container, a decision formed in my mind before I could overthink it. Back on the floor, I approached his table again. "Would you like some pasta, sir? It's homemade. I have extra." The lie came easily. There was nothing extra about it. It was all I had to eat today, but something in me couldn't bear to see him sitting there with just tea. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something that might have been embarrassment. "I couldn't possibly. Please," I insisted, already placing my container on his table. "My nonna's recipe. It would make me happy if you enjoyed it." After a moment's hesitation, he accepted with a nod that somehow conveyed both gratitude and dignity. I quickly brought him utensils before rushing off to my other tables, ignoring the hollow feeling in my stomach. As the lunch rush began to wane, I noticed the old man preparing to leave. He moved slowly, with a slight limp, but refused help from another server who offered assistance. Before departing, he approached the hostess station where I was reorganizing menus. "Thank you for your kindness," he said simply, pressing something into my palm. Before I could respond, he had shuffled out the door. I opened my hand to find a worn silver coin with strange markings. Not currency, but some kind of token or medallion. It seemed old and possibly valuable, though I had no idea what it represented. I slipped it into my pocket, oddly touched by the gesture. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of fatigue and hunger. By closing time at 10, I was dead on my feet, the coin in my pocket nearly forgotten. I bundled up against the February chill and began the 20-minute walk to my apartment, too tired even to worry about the heating bill waiting for me at home. The streets of North End were mostly deserted, storefronts dark except for the occasional late-night cafe or bar. I hugged the buildings, keeping my head down against the wind. When the black car pulled up beside me, I barely registered it until the passenger window slid down with an electronic hum. "Excuse me." The voice was deep, male, and carried an authority that made me stop despite my better judgment. I peered into the car, making out only a silhouette in the darkness of the back seat. "Can I help you?" I asked, already taking a step back, suddenly aware of how isolated the street had become. "I believe you helped my father today." The statement was so unexpected that I stood frozen, confusion momentarily overriding caution. The rear door opened, and a man stepped out onto the sidewalk. The first thing I noticed was his height. He towered over my 5'4" frame. The second was how the streetlight caught the sharp angles of his face, high cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes that mirrored the same striking blue I'd seen earlier today, but without any of the gentleness. He wore a black coat that looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe, and despite the late hour, he was flanked by a broad-shouldered man who remained beside the car, scanning the street with practiced vigilance. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice embarrassingly small in the quiet street. "The man at Bellini's, the one you gave your lunch to." He took a step closer, and I caught the scent of expensive cologne mingled with something darker, like smoke. That was my father. "Oh." I shifted uncomfortably. It was nothing, really. Nothing? The word carried an edge that made me shiver. My father is a proud man. He doesn't accept nothing from strangers. My heart began to pound against my ribs. Had I somehow offended them? Was this some kind of twisted shakedown? "I didn't mean to overstep," I said quickly. He seemed what? The man tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made me feel like a specimen under glass. "Lonely," I admitted, "and I thought he might be hungry." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. "And you? Were you not hungry?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm fine. Are you?" His gaze traveled over me, taking in my threadbare coat, the worn sneakers, the exhaustion I couldn't hide. "What's your name?" "Ella," I answered automatically, then immediately regretted giving away even that small piece of information. "Ella," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "I'm Luca Ricci." He extended his hand, and I found myself taking it despite my misgivings. His grip was warm and firm, engulfing my smaller hand completely. A current of something electric passed between us, making my breath catch. "My father wanted me to thank you properly," Luca continued, releasing my hand after a beat too long. "He said you refused payment." I remembered the coin. "He gave me something, a token or medallion." Luca's expression changed, a flash of something unreadable crossing his features. "May I see it?" Hesitantly, I reached into my pocket and produced the silver coin. When Luca saw it, he went very still. "Do you know what this is?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "It's a Ricci family token. My father hasn't given one to anyone in over 20 years. He looked at me with renewed interest, as if seeing me for the first time. "It means you're under our protection now." "Protection?" I repeated, confusion and a hint of fear making my voice waver. "I don't need protection." Luca's mouth curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everyone needs protection in this city, Ella. Especially someone who works late and walks home alone." Before I could formulate a response, he gestured to the open car door. "Let me drive you home. It's cold, and you look exhausted." Every warning bell in my head was ringing, but the fatigue weighing on my limbs and the biting cold made the sleek, warm car look impossibly tempting. Still, I hesitated. "I don't know you," I said, clutching my bag closer. "But my father knows you," Luca countered smoothly. "And in my world, that counts for everything." Something in his tone suggested this wasn't really a request, despite its polite phrasing. The silent man by the car shifted slightly, a subtle reminder of Luca's authority. "Just a ride home," Luca added, his voice softening fractionally, "to express my gratitude." Making what was possibly the worst or best decision of my life, I stepped toward the car. Luca's hand came to rest on the small of my back as he guided me inside. His touch feather-light yet somehow possessive. The interior was luxurious, soft leather seats and warmth that enveloped me immediately. Luca slid in beside me, his large frame making the spacious back seat suddenly feel intimate. "Address?" he asked as the driver started the engine. I gave it reluctantly, hyper-aware of his proximity and the subtle scent of his cologne. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the gentle hum of the car making my eyelids heavy despite my nervousness. "You work hard," Luca remarked. Not a question, but an observation. "2 jobs," I replied automatically. "Bellini's during the day and bartending at the Alibi on weekends." "To support yourself?" "And my sister," I found myself admitting. "She's 17, still in high school." "Parents?" gone. The single word carried all the explanation I was willing to give a stranger. Luca nodded, as if my sparse answers had confirmed something for him. When we pulled up to my rundown apartment building, embarrassment flushed through me. The contrast between his world and mine couldn't have been more stark. "Thank you for the ride," I said quickly, eager to escape the confines of the car and the intensity of his gaze. "Ella." His voice stopped me as I reached for the door handle. He pulled out a business card and pressed it into my palm, much as his father had done with the coin. "If you need anything at all, call this number." The card was heavy, cream-colored stock with just a phone number embossed in black. No name, no title. Why would you help me? I couldn't stop the question from tumbling out. Luca's eyes met mine, and something hungry flickered in their blue depths. "Let's just say I take care of what belongs to me." A chill ran down my spine at his words. "I don't belong to anyone." His smile was slow, predatory. "You accepted my father's token. In our world, that means something." Before I could process the implications of that statement, he leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Sleep well, Ella. I'll be seeing you again soon." I scrambled out of the car, clutching my bag and the mysterious card, watching as the black vehicle pulled smoothly away from the curb. Only when it disappeared around the corner did I release the breath I'd been holding. Inside my cold apartment, I leaned against the door, trying to make sense of the encounter. The silver token felt heavy in my pocket, and Luca's parting words echoed in my mind. "I'll be seeing you again soon." I had no idea who Luca Ricci really was, but something told me my simple act of kindness had just entangled me in something far bigger and more dangerous than I could imagine. And the most terrifying part? A small, traitorous part of me was already looking forward to seeing those piercing blue eyes again. Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams haunted by piercing blue eyes and cryptic warnings. I woke before my alarm, the silver coin still clutched in my palm, the edges having left imprints on my skin. Morning light filtered weakly through my thin curtains, illuminating the modest studio apartment I shared with my sister Mia. She was still asleep on the pull-out sofa, her dark hair spilling across the pillow, her breathing slightly labored from the cold aggravating her asthma. We couldn't afford to keep the heat running through the night, not with the electric bill already overdue. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and headed to our tiny bathroom. The mirror reflected a face I barely recognized some days. Dark circles under hazel eyes, cheekbones too prominent from too many skipped meals. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the lingering unease from last night's encounter. "Who are you, Luca Ricci?" I whispered to my reflection, remembering his words, his proximity in the car, the way his eyes had claimed me before he even touched me. The business card sat on my nightstand, its elegant simplicity somehow threatening in the harsh morning light. I should throw it away, forget the whole strange encounter, yet something stopped me. I tucked it into my wallet instead, next to the meager collection of bills that would barely cover this week's groceries. "Ella," Mia's sleepy voice called from the main room. "You're up early." I emerged from the bathroom with a forced smile. "Just couldn't sleep. How are you feeling?" "Fine," she said, the slight wheeze in her breath betraying her. "Are you working both jobs today?" "Just Bellini's," I replied, moving to the kitchenette to start coffee. "But I picked up an extra shift tomorrow." Mia frowned, pushing herself up on the sofa bed. "You're working too much," says the straight-A student who's getting into Boston University with a scholarship, I countered, tossing a granola bar her way. "Someone has to keep you in those fancy textbooks." She caught the bar, but didn't open it. "I got another letter from the financial aid office yesterday. Even with the scholarship, there's still a gap." My stomach twisted. We'd been through this before. The scholarship was impressive but partial. And even with loans, we were looking at thousands in out-of-pocket expenses. Money we simply didn't have. "We'll figure it out," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Eat your breakfast. You'll be late for school." As Mia shuffled to the bathroom, I leaned against the counter, the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down on me. 4 years ago, when our mother succumbed to the same heart condition that had taken our father years earlier, I dropped out of community college to keep us afloat. Everything since then had been about survival and making sure Mia had the chances I'd lost. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Good morning, Ella. I hope you slept well. A package will arrive for you at Bellini's today. Luca." I nearly dropped the phone, my heart racing. How had he gotten my number? I hadn't given it to him. The invasion of privacy sent a chill down my spine, yet mingled with it was an inexplicable thrill that he'd thought of me this morning. I didn't respond, unsure what to say, or if I should encourage whatever this was. Instead, I focused on getting Mia out the door with her inhaler and lunch money, then prepared for my own day with a gnawing anxiety about what awaited me at work. Bellini's was quieter than usual for a weekday lunch, the February weather keeping many potential customers at home. I moved mechanically through my tasks, jumping at every opening door, expecting Luca or his father to appear. By mid-afternoon, nothing had happened, and I began to think the text had been some kind of strange joke. Then Margot approached me, curiosity evident in her expression. "There's a delivery for you at the front." At the hostess station stood a courier in a crisp uniform, holding a large white box tied with a simple black ribbon. "Ella Blackwood?" he asked, consulting his clipboard. "That's me," I confirmed, bewildered. "Sign here, please." After I scribbled my signature, he handed me the box with a polite nod and departed. The other servers gathered, watching with undisguised interest as I set the box on the counter. "Secret admirer?" Margot teased. "No idea," I murmured, tugging at the ribbon with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a coat, a beautiful caramel-colored wool coat that looked impossibly expensive. Beneath it was a pair of leather gloves lined with soft cashmere and a cream-colored scarf. A small card rested atop these treasures. No one under my protection should walk home cold. Heat rushed to my face, part embarrassment, part indignation, part something else I didn't want to name. "Wow," breathed Margot, reaching out to touch the coat sleeve. "This is Max Mara. That's like $2,000, easy." $2,000? I echoed incredulously. "For a coat?" "Who sent it?" another server asked. Peering at the card I quickly tucked away. "Just someone I met," I said vaguely. "There's been a mistake. I can't accept this." But even as I said it, I remembered the heating bill waiting at home. Mia's wheezing this morning. The financial aid letter. The coat represented more money than I made in a month. If I returned it, no. I shut down that calculating part of my brain immediately. Whatever Luca Ricci's game was, I wanted no part of it. Gifts like this came with strings, expectations. I'd learned that lesson the hard way before. I closed the box and stashed it in the break room, trying to focus on my remaining tables. But my mind kept drifting to the coat, to Luca's text, to the silver token that seemed to have upended my carefully constructed, if precarious life in less than 24 hours. At the end of my shift, I changed out of my uniform and reluctantly retrieved the box. Whatever I decided to do with its contents, leaving it at the restaurant wasn't an option. The temperature had dropped further, and my thin jacket provided little protection against the biting wind as I stepped outside. The black car was waiting at the curb. My steps faltered as the back door opened, and Luca emerged, looking even more imposing than I remembered. Today he wore a charcoal suit under his open coat, the tailored lines emphasizing his broad shoulders and lean frame. The same silent bodyguard hovered nearby, his presence a reminder of who I was dealing with. "You didn't respond to my message," Luca said by way of greeting. His eyes dropped to the box in my arms, then back to my face, assessing. "How did you get my number?" I countered, keeping my distance. A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I have resources." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting for now." He nodded toward the box. "You haven't tried it on." "I'm returning it," I said firmly, extending the box toward him. "I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept gifts like this from someone I barely know." Luca made no move to take the box. "You gave your lunch to a stranger yesterday with no expectation of return. Why is it so difficult to accept something given in the same spirit?" "Because that was a $7 container of pasta, not a $2,000 coat." The words burst out louder than I intended, drawing glances from passers-by. Luca stepped closer, his voice dropping to a register that seemed to vibrate through me. "The value is relative, Ella. To you, that lunch might have been everything you had. To me, this, he gestured to the box, is nothing. The casual dismissal of an amount that could change my and Mia's circumstances stung more than it should have. Then it should be easy to take it back, I insisted, still holding out the box. He studied me, head tilted slightly. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who would be easier to impress. There was a note of genuine curiosity in his voice. Someone who would ask for more, not less. Then you've clearly been dealing with the wrong kind of people, I replied, a spark of defiance cutting through my unease. Luca's laugh was unexpected, a rich, warm sound that transformed his severe features into something dangerously attractive. Clearly. He sobered, his expression turning serious. The coat stays with you. Consider it repayment for my father's debt. Your father doesn't owe me anything. In our world, a debt of honor is sacred. He stepped forward, gently pushing the box back toward me. You showed kindness to Arichi. We repay our debts, Ella. Always. Something in his tone suggested refusing again would be futile. I lowered the box, still unsure. At least let me drive you home, he offered, gesturing to the waiting car. It's colder today. I hesitated, weighing my options. The walk home was long, and my thin jacket offered little protection against the February chill. Plus, I was curious about him, about his father, about the token that apparently meant so much. All right, I conceded. But just a ride. His satisfied smile suggested he'd known I would agree all along. Inside the car, the familiar scent of leather and his cologne enveloped me. I set the box between us, a flimsy barrier that did little to diminish his overwhelming presence. Your father? I began after we pulled away from the curb. Is he well? Luca's expression softened fractionally. He is, though he tires easily these days. He mentioned your kindness several times last night. Why was he alone at Bellini's? I asked. If he's important to you, shouldn't someone have been with him? A shadow passed over Luca's face. My father is stubborn. He slipped away from his caretaker yesterday. Not the first time. He used to run our family business before his health declined. He glanced at me. He was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's last year. The revelation surprised me. Not just the information itself, but that Luca would share something so personal. I'm sorry, I said softly. Don't be. He has good days and bad days. Yesterday was complicated. The anniversary of my mother's passing, he added after a pause, his gaze fixed on the passing cityscape. He was visiting her favorite restaurant. The unexpected vulnerability in his admission made my chest tighten. I thought of my own parents, of the emptiness their absence had left behind. I understand, I said simply. My mother died 4 years ago. Some days I still expect to hear her voice when I walk through the door. Luca turned to me, his blue eyes searching mine as if looking for the truth in my words. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him. He nodded once, then changed the subject. You mentioned a sister yesterday. Mia, I confirmed. She's 17, finishing high school this year. And it's just the two of you? Yes. That's a heavy burden for someone your age. I bristled slightly. It's not a burden. She's all I have. I didn't mean to offend, he said, holding up a hand. Family responsibility is something I understand better than most. The car slowed as we approached my building. Unlike last night, Luca exited first, coming around to open my door. The gesture was unexpectedly gentlemanly from someone who exuded such dangerous energy. Will you try on the coat? He asked as I stepped out, still clutching the box. Why is it so important to you? Because you need it, he replied simply, and because I want to see you in it. There was no mistaking the hunger that darkened his eyes as he spoke. It sent a flurry of butterflies through my stomach, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. Against my better judgment, I set the box on the hood of the car and withdrew the caramel coat. It was even more beautiful in the fading daylight, the wool soft against my fingertips. I slipped it on, immediately enveloped in its warmth and subtle scent of luxury. Luca's intake of breath was audible. He circled me slowly, his gaze appreciative but somehow proprietary, as if confirming what he already knew, that I would look exactly as he had imagined in his gift. Perfect, he murmured, stopping before me. He reached out, adjusting the collar gently, his knuckles brushing against my neck. The contact, brief as it was, sent electricity coursing through me. "Thank you," I whispered, suddenly breathless. "But I still don't understand what you want from me." Luca's hands lingered at my collar, his proximity overwhelming my senses. "Dinner," he said, "tomorrow night. Let me thank you properly for what you did for my father." Warning bells clanged in my head, but they seemed distant compared to the thundering of my heart. "I'm working tomorrow. The alibi, remember? What time do you finish?" 11. "I'll pick you up." It wasn't a question. I should have refused, should have stepped back, returned the coat, walked away from whatever dangerous game this was. Instead, I heard myself say, "Okay." His smile was triumphant, though he tried to hide it. "Until tomorrow, then." I nodded, unable to form words as he leaned in, his lips brushing my cheek in a barely there kiss that nevertheless branded me more effectively than any possessive touch could have. As I watched the black car pull away, I stood on the sidewalk wrapped in a coat worth more than 2 months' rent, touching my fingers to the spot his lips had grazed, wondering what I'd just agreed to. Inside my apartment, Mia looked up from her homework, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. "Whoa. Where did you get that?" "It was a gift," I said vaguely, slipping it off and carefully laying it across our small kitchen counter. "From who? It looks expensive." "Just someone I met." I busied myself with putting on water for pasta, avoiding her curious gaze. "Ella." Her tone made me turn. "What's going on?" "You're acting weird," I sighed, knowing I couldn't keep secrets from my sister for long. "I did something nice for an old man at the restaurant yesterday. Turns out he's the father of someone important." I hesitated, unsure how to describe Luca. His son wanted to thank me. With a designer coat? Mia's eyebrows rose skeptically. "What kind of important are we talking about here?" I thought of the bodyguard, the luxury car, the way Luca had spoken of family honor and debts. The pieces began to fit together in a way that made my stomach clench. "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted, though a suspicion was forming. "But I think he might be connected to something dangerous." Morning brought a text message from an unknown number, different from Luca's. "Your sister's scholarship has been fully funded. Remaining tuition gap covered. A friend of the Ricci family." I stared at my phone in disbelief, my hands trembling. This couldn't be coincidence. I hadn't mentioned the scholarship issues to Luca, which meant he'd been investigating us, digging into our personal lives. The invasion of privacy made me feel exposed, vulnerable. Yet mingled with my indignation was a shameful relief. Mia's future was secure. When she burst into the apartment that afternoon, waving an official letter from Boston University, her face alight with joy, I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. "I got a full ride," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. "They said an anonymous donor established a special fund for students with medical needs. Can you believe it?" I hugged her back, swallowing the lump in my throat. "That's amazing, Mia. You deserve it." "Now you can cut back on your hours," she said, pulling away to look at me earnestly. "Maybe even take some classes yourself." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," I replied with a forced smile. "But this calls for celebration. How about pizza tonight?" As Mia chattered excitedly about dorm options and course selections, my mind raced. Whatever game Luca was playing, he'd just raised the stakes exponentially. The coat was one thing. This was something else entirely, something that bound me to him with invisible strings made of gratitude and obligation. I arrived at the alibi just before my 5 p.m. shift, still wrestling with conflicting emotions. The bar was already filling with the after-work crowd, the familiar din of conversation and clinking glasses a welcome distraction from my thoughts. "You look like you could use a drink yourself," observed Ray, the grizzled bartender who'd taken me under his wing when I started 6 months ago. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied, tying on my apron. "Busy week." He gave me a skeptical look but didn't push. That was what I liked about Ray. He knew when to back off. The evening passed in a blur of drink orders, flirtatious customers, and the methodical rhythm of mixology that usually calmed my nerves. Tonight, however, I found myself glancing at the door every few minutes, anticipating Luca's arrival with a mixture of dread and shameful excitement. At 10:30, as the crowd thinned slightly, the atmosphere in the bar shifted. It was subtle, a momentary hush, a collective tension that rippled through the room. I looked up from the gin and tonic I was preparing to see Luca entering, flanked by two men who were clearly security despite their expensive suits. Unlike the businessmen who frequented the alibi, Luca didn't try to blend in. He commanded attention without seeking it, his presence magnetic. He wore dark jeans and a black button-down shirt under a tailored gray blazer, more casual than I'd seen him before, but no less intimidating. His eyes found me immediately, as if he'd mapped my exact location before entering. A slight smile curved his lips as he made his way to the bar, ignoring the curious glances from other patrons. "Whiskey, neat," he told Ray, though his gaze remained on me. "And whatever she recommends." Ray glanced between us, his eyebrows raised. "Friend of yours, Ella? We're acquainted," I managed, continuing to prepare my customer's drink with hands that were suddenly unsteady. "I'll have what he's having," I told Ray, needing the liquid courage. Luca took a seat at the bar, his security detail positioning themselves discreetly nearby. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I was wearing nothing special, just black jeans and a deep green blouse that brought out the flecks of green in my hazel eyes, yet the way he looked at me made me feel like I was draped in silk and diamonds. "I need to talk to you," I said quietly, sliding the gin and tonic to my waiting customer before returning to him. "About my sister's scholarship." His expression revealed nothing. "We'll discuss it over dinner." "Was it you?" I pressed, leaning closer across the bar. "Did you arrange that?" "As I said, we'll discuss it later." His tone was gentle but firm. "When do you finish?" 30 minutes. He nodded, sipping his whiskey. "I'll wait." True to his word, Luca remained at the bar as I completed my shift, nursing his single drink, occasionally checking his phone, but mostly watching me work with an intensity that made my skin tingle. Ray shot me questioning looks, but I avoided his gaze, focusing on closing out my register and handing over to the night bartender. In the back room, I changed out of my work shirt, pulled on the caramel coat that I'd brought despite my misgivings, and stared at my reflection in the small, spotted mirror. What was I doing? Going to dinner with a man who was almost certainly involved in organized crime, who had meddled in my personal affairs without permission, who looked at me like I was already his. Yet I couldn't deny the magnetic pull he exerted on me. Beyond his obvious physical appeal, there was something about Luca Ricci that called to the most primitive part of me, the part that recognized power and was drawn to its shelter after years of struggling alone. When I emerged, Luca was waiting by the door, his eyes appreciative as they took in my appearance in the coat he'd given me. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. I nodded, suddenly nervous. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere quiet, where we can talk properly." He guided me outside to the waiting car, his hand at the small of my back possessive yet gentle. The restaurant was in the South End, a discreet establishment with no name on the door, just a small brass plaque with the number 23. Inside, the lighting was dim, the decor understated but elegant. The maitre d' greeted Luca by name, leading us immediately to a secluded corner booth without checking any reservation. "Mr. Ricci, your usual table," he murmured, pulling out my chair. "Antonio will be your server tonight." After we were seated and left with menus, I looked around, noting that despite the late hour, several tables were occupied by serious-looking men in expensive suits. No one spoke loudly. Conversations were conducted in hushed tones, creating an atmosphere of exclusivity and secrets. "This place isn't in any guidebook," I observed. Luca's lips quirked. "It caters to a selective clientele." "People like you," I said, emboldened by the whiskey I'd consumed earlier. "People who can make scholarship money appear out of nowhere." He set down his menu, his blue eyes steady on mine. "Is that accusation or gratitude I hear in your voice?" "Both," I admitted. "What you did for Mia, it's life-changing. But you had no right to investigate our personal struggles without my knowledge. When you accepted my father's token, you became my responsibility," Luca replied, as if this explained everything. "That extends to your sister. I didn't ask for your protection or your charity." Yet you needed both. His gaze softened fractionally. You've been carrying your burden alone for too long, Ella. There's no shame in accepting help when it's offered freely. Is it really free, though? I challenged. What do you expect in return? The waiter appeared before Luca could answer, pouring wine without being asked. Luca ordered for both of us in fluent Italian, a consultation I might have resented if I hadn't been so distracted by the elegant way the language flowed from his lips. When we were alone again, Luca leaned forward, his expression serious. I don't expect anything you're not willing to give. My interest in you is genuine, not transactional. Why me? The question had been burning inside me since our first meeting. You could have anyone. Because you gave your lunch to my father without knowing who he was, he answered simply. Because when I offered you an expensive coat, your first instinct was to return it rather than ask for more, because you've sacrificed everything for your sister without resentment or complaint. His voice dropped lower, and because from the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. The raw honesty in his words stole my breath. I don't understand. Neither do I, entirely. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine, but I'd like to explore it, if you're willing. The contact sent warmth spiraling through me. Before I could respond, a shadow fell across our table. I looked up to see an elegantly dressed man in his 50s, his silver hair swept back from a face that might once have been handsome, before hard living carved deep lines into it. Luca, the man said, his voice carrying a hint of the same Italian accent I'd heard in his father's speech. What a pleasant surprise. Luca's expression cooled noticeably, though he rose and shook the man's hand. Victor, I wasn't aware you frequented this establishment. New development, Victor replied, his gaze shifting to me with undisguised interest. Won't you introduce me to your lovely companion? I felt Luca stiffen beside me, a barely perceptible change that nevertheless radiated tension. Ella, this is Victor Calabrese, an associate. Victor, Ella Blackwood. Enchanted, Victor said, taking my hand before I could offer it, pressing his lips to my knuckles in an old-fashioned gesture that made my skin crawl. Luca has been keeping you a well-guarded secret. We only recently met, I replied, gently extracting my hand. Is that so? Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. How interesting that Luca would bring a new acquaintance to such an exclusive venue. If you'll excuse us, Luca cut in smoothly. Our dinner is arriving. Victor inclined his head, though his eyes remained cold. Of course. Enjoy your evening. To me, he added, I hope to see more of you, Miss Blackwood. As he walked away, I noticed Luca's knuckles had turned white where he gripped his wine glass. Who is he really? I asked quietly. A rival, Luca answered, his voice tight. And not someone you want to know better. The waiter arrived with our food, delicate pasta dishes that smelled divine, providing a welcome interruption to the sudden tension. As we ate, Luca gradually relaxed, steering the conversation to lighter topics. My childhood in Boston, Mia's academic interests, my abandoned dreams of becoming a photographer. Why did you give it up? He asked when I mentioned my once passionate hobby. Necessity, I replied with a small shrug. Cameras and lenses are expensive. After my mother died, I sold my equipment to cover funeral costs. Something like anger flashed in his eyes. You've had to sacrifice too much. Life isn't always fair, I said, uncomfortable with his intensity. You adapt. Or you find someone who can restore the balance, he countered. The rest of the dinner passed pleasantly, the food exquisite, the wine warming me from within. Luca was an attentive listener, drawing out stories I hadn't shared with anyone in years. By the time dessert arrived, a delicate tiramisu we shared between us, I found myself reluctant for the evening to end. In the car afterward, Luca sat closer than before, his thigh pressing against mine in the spacious back seat. I'd like to see you again, he said, his voice husky in the intimate darkness. I'd like that too, I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. He smiled, satisfaction evident in his expression. Tomorrow I want to introduce you properly to my father. He's been asking about you. The request seemed significant, though I couldn't pinpoint why. All right. As the car pulled up to my building, Luca walked me to the door, his hand entwined with mine. In the dim hallway, he paused, turning me gently to face him. "Ella," he murmured, one hand coming up to cup my cheek. "May I kiss you?" The question, so formally asked, made my heart race. I nodded, unable to find my voice. Luca leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind. When his lips met mine, the kiss was achingly gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. Then, as I responded, it deepened into something hungry and possessive that made my knees weak. His arms encircled me, pulling me against the hard plane of his chest as he explored my mouth with a thoroughness that left me gasping. When we finally broke apart, his eyes had darkened to midnight blue, his breathing as unsteady as mine. "I'll pick you up at noon tomorrow," he said, his voice rough. I nodded, still dazed from the kiss. As I watched him walk away, I touched my fingers to my tingling lips, realizing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation that I was falling for a man who might be as dangerous as he was irresistible. The next day dawned bright but frigid, sunlight glinting off fresh snow that had fallen overnight. I woke early, my thoughts immediately turning to Luca, and the kiss we'd shared, the memory of his lips on mine. The way his arms had enveloped me sent a flush of warmth through my body that had nothing to do with the extra blanket I'd piled on my bed. Mia was already up, hunched over her laptop at our tiny kitchen table, a mug of coffee steaming beside her. She looked up when I emerged from the bathroom, her expression curious. "So, are you going to tell me about this mystery man who's got you coming home late and smiling in your sleep?" she asked, closing her laptop. "And does he have anything to do with this?" She held up a small package that must have been delivered while I was in the shower. "What is that?" I asked, reaching for it. "No idea. It was outside our door this morning." The box was small, wrapped in simple black paper with no card or note. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a delicate silver pendant, a small camera crafted with exquisite detail, hanging from a fine chain. "Oh," I breathed, lifting it carefully. "Secret admirer?" Mia pressed, leaning forward to examine the necklace. "That looks expensive." I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Mia was smart and perceptive. She'd know if I was hiding something significant. "His name is Luca," I finally admitted. "I met him through work, sort of. He's different." "Different how?" "Intense, confident, used to getting what he wants." I fingered the silver camera pendant, understanding its meaning immediately. Luca had been listening when I mentioned my abandoned passion for photography. "Sounds intriguing," Mia said, her eyes sparkling with interest. "When do I get to meet him?" "It's still very new," I hedged. "Actually, I'm meeting his father today." Mia's eyebrows shot up. "His father? That's moving fast." "It's complicated." I clasped the necklace around my throat, the pendant resting just below my collarbone. "Luca feels he owes me something because I was kind to his father." "And what does Luca do exactly?" Mia asked, her tone suddenly wary. I busied myself making coffee, avoiding her gaze. "He's in family business." "What kind of family business?" "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted, which was technically true. I had suspicions, but no confirmation of exactly what the Ricci family was involved in. "I'm still getting to know him." Mia studied me for a long moment. "Just be careful, okay? You're always taking care of everyone else. Make sure whoever this guy is, he's taking care of you too." Her concern touched me. "I promise I'll be careful." At noon, a text from Luca informed me he was waiting downstairs. I'd dressed carefully in dark jeans, a cream sweater, and the caramel coat, the silver camera pendant visible at my neckline. My hair, usually pulled back for work, fell loose around my shoulders. Luca stood beside his car, hands in the pockets of a charcoal overcoat, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. When he saw me, his expression softened into something that made my heart flutter. "You're wearing it," he said by way of greeting, reaching out to touch the pendant gently. "Do you like it?" "It's beautiful," I replied honestly. "But you have to stop sending me gifts, Luca. I can't keep accepting them." "It's just a token," he insisted, brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected tenderness. "A reminder of something you loved." His fingers lingered against my cheek. "Thank you for agreeing to meet my father properly." The drive took us to Beacon Hill, where historic brownstones lined streets that had been meticulously cleared of snow. We stopped before one of the most elegant buildings, where a doorman immediately hurried to open Luca's door. "Mr. Ricci," he greeted with deferential politeness. "Your father is expecting you." The interior of the brownstone was a study in old-world luxury, gleaming hardwood floors, antique furniture, and artwork that looked museum quality. A housekeeper directed us to a sunlit sitting room at the rear of the house, where the old man I'd met at Bellini's sat in a leather armchair, a book open on his lap. He looked up as we entered, his face lighting with recognition. "Ah, the angel with the pasta," he exclaimed, setting his book aside and attempting to rise. "Please don't get up," I said quickly, crossing the room to him. "Papa, this is Ella Blackwood," Luca said, following me. "Ella, my father, Antonio Ricci." "A pleasure to meet you properly, Mr. Ricci," I said, taking the hand he extended. "Antonio, please." His grip was surprisingly strong despite his apparent frailty. Sit. Tell me how my son is treating you." I perched on the sofa adjacent to his chair, Luca settling beside me, his thigh pressing warmly against mine. "He's been very kind," I replied diplomatically. Antonio's bright blue eyes, so like his son's, twinkled with amusement. "Kind? Bah, my son is many things, but kind is not the word most would use." He turned to Luca. "You didn't tell me she was so beautiful." "I didn't have to," Luca replied with a small smile. "You saw for yourself." A young woman entered with a tray of coffee and pastries, setting it on the table between us before departing silently. Antonio insisted on serving me himself, his hands steady as he poured rich, dark coffee into delicate cups. "My Luca tells me you have no family except a sister," Antonio said, handing me a cup. "That's right," I confirmed. "Our parents passed away several years ago." He nodded solemnly. "Family is everything. Without family, a person has no roots, no foundation." His gaze grew distant. "I lost my Maria, Luca's mother, 12 years ago. Not a day passes that I don't miss her." "I'm sorry for your loss," I said softly. "She would have liked you," Antonio continued, focusing on me again. "She always said Luca needed someone with fire in her soul. Too many women see only what he can give them, not who he is." I felt Luca tense slightly beside me. "Papa," he warned quietly. Antonio waved a dismissive hand. "You are too protective, figlio mio. Ella is not a child to be shielded from truths. To me," he added, "my son carries heavy responsibilities. He needs a partner who understands the weight he bears, not just someone to warm his bed." "Papa, enough," Luca said more firmly. I touched his arm gently. "It's okay." To Antonio I said, "I appreciate your candor, but Luca and I are still getting to know each other. It's too early to talk about partnerships." Antonio studied me for a long moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied. "Wise girl. But remember what I said about the token I gave you. In our family, such things are not given lightly." The rest of the visit passed pleasantly, with Antonio sharing stories of Luca's childhood, much to his son's evident discomfort, and asking thoughtful questions about my own life and Mia's studies. Throughout, I noticed the respectful way the household staff treated the elder Ricci, despite his occasional confusion when names or dates escaped him. As we were preparing to leave, Antonio took my hands in his. "You must come for Sunday dinner," he insisted. "The whole family will be here. I want them to meet the girl who has caught my son's attention." The invitation felt significant, judging by the way Luca's expression tightened. "That's very kind, but we would be honored," Luca interrupted smoothly. "If Ella is free, of course." Put on the spot, I nodded. "Thank you. I'd love to come." Antonio beamed, patting my cheek affectionately. Good. And bring your sister. Any family of yours is welcome in my home." In the car afterward, I turned to Luca. "Is Sunday dinner important?" He kept his eyes on the road, his profile sharp against the winter sunlight. "My father doesn't invite outsiders to family dinner often. It's a statement." "What kind of statement?" He glanced at me briefly. "That you're important to me." The simple declaration sent warmth coursing through me. "And am I? Important to you?" Luca pulled the car over suddenly, shifting to face me fully. "Ella," he said, his voice low and intense. "From the moment I saw you, something inside me changed. I've never felt this way about anyone before." He reached out, cupping my face in his large hand. "I know this is happening quickly, but I'm not a man who hesitates when he finds something precious." His words should have frightened me, but instead, they stirred something deep and primal. "I feel it too," I admitted, leaning into his touch. "But there's still so much I don't know about you, about your family. What do you want to know?" The direct question caught me off guard. I'd expected evasion, not openness. "Your business," I said carefully. "The way people react to your name. The security that follows you everywhere." I took a breath. "Are you involved in something illegal, Luca?" His expression remained neutral, but his eyes darkened. "Would it matter if I was?" "I think it might," I replied honestly. "Depending on what it is." Luca was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my cheek. "My family has interests in many businesses, restaurants, shipping, real estate. Some of these operations exist in gray areas of the law." His gaze never wavered from mine. "I won't insult your intelligence by pretending we're nothing more than legitimate businessmen, but neither are we the monsters that movies would have you believe." "You're admitting you're connected to the Mafia," I said, needing to hear it plainly. "I'm admitting that my family operates according to its own code, and that code sometimes conflicts with conventional law." His hand dropped from my face. "If that changes how you see me, I understand." I should have been terrified, should have asked him to take me home immediately, cut all ties, and pretend we'd never met. Instead, I found myself studying the complex man before me, the same man who'd arranged me as scholarship, who'd remembered my lost passion for photography, who looked at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "I don't know what this makes me," I said slowly, "but it doesn't change how I feel when I'm with you." Relief flickered across his features. "I promise you, Ella, you will always be safe with me. No harm will ever come to you or your sister while you're under my protection." "I'm not used to being protected," I admitted. "I've been the protector for so long." "Then let someone else carry that burden for a while." He leaned forward, his lips brushing mine gently. "Let me." The kiss deepened, his arms pulling me closer across the console between us. Unlike last night's carefully controlled embrace, this was hungry, almost desperate, as if he needed to convince himself that I was real, that I hadn't rejected him despite knowing the truth. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "Come home with me," he murmured. "Let me show you who I really am." The invitation hung between us, weighted with meaning. I knew what I was agreeing to if I said yes, not just physically, but stepping further into his world, a world I still only dimly understood. "Yes," I whispered, making my choice. Luca's home was a penthouse apartment, in a sleek high-rise overlooking the harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city and water beyond, the winter sunlight turning the snow-covered landscape into a glittering wonderland. The space was surprisingly warm, not in temperature, but in feeling. Modern furnishings in rich browns and deep blues, bookshelves filled with well-worn volumes, even a grand piano in one corner. It was the home of a man with taste and education, not the gaudy display of wealth I might have expected. "It's beautiful," I said, moving to the windows to take in the view. "It's lonely," Luca replied, coming to stand behind me, his hand settling on my waist. "Until now." I turned in his arms, facing him. "Luca, I need to know what happens next. Between us, I mean." "Oh, whatever you want to happen," he answered, his eyes serious. "I won't pressure you." "But you have expectations," I pressed. "Your father certainly seems to." Luca sighed, leading me to the sofa where we sat, his arm around my shoulders. "My father is traditional. In his mind, when a man finds the woman he wants, he doesn't waste time." He touched the pendant at my throat gently. "I won't deny that I feel something powerful for you, Ella, something I've never experienced before. But I don't expect you to make any declarations or commitments until you're ready." The sincerity in his voice touched me deeply. Here was a man accustomed to commanding, to taking what he wanted, offering me choice and time instead. "Thank you," I whispered, leaning into him. "For understanding." His lips found mine again, soft and questioning at first, then with growing intensity as I responded eagerly. My hand slid into his hair, pulling him closer as his arms tightened around me. "Ella," he murmured against my mouth, "I've wanted you from the moment I saw you." "Show me," I breathed, surrendering to the fire building between us. His eyes, darkened with desire, searched mine for confirmation. Finding it, he stood, lifting me effortlessly into his arms. As he carried me toward the bedroom, I wrapped my arms around his neck, knowing I was crossing a threshold from which there would be no easy return. The week that followed passed in a dreamlike haze. By day, I continued my shifts at Bellini's, though Luca insisted I quit my weekend job at the Alibi. By night, I found myself increasingly in his world, dining at exclusive restaurants, attending a private gallery opening, spending quiet evenings at his penthouse where we talked for hours before inevitably ending up tangled in his sheets. Through it all, Luca was attentive, passionate, and surprisingly vulnerable in unguarded moments. When he held me in the darkness, he sometimes spoke of his childhood, raised to take over the family business, the weight of legacy and tradition, the loss of his mother that had left both him and Antonio adrift. "I was 19 when she died," he told me one night, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. "Cancer. My father was never the same afterward." I pressed closer to him, offering wordless comfort. "Is that when you took over the business?" "Not entirely. My father continued for several years, but I was being groomed, learning every aspect." His arms tightened around me. When his memory began to fail, I had no choice but to step in completely. On Thursday, a package arrived at my apartment, a professional-grade camera with multiple lenses and accessories. The note simply read, "Start creating again. L." This time, I didn't try to refuse the gift. Instead, I spent hours that evening reacquainting myself with the familiar weight of a camera in my hands, the technical details returning like muscle memory. When Luca called later, I found myself thanking him without reservation. "You sound happy," he said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "I am," I admitted. I'd forgotten how much I loved photography. "Bring the camera on Sunday," he suggested. "My father's garden is particularly beautiful in winter." Sunday arrived with clear skies and biting cold. Mia, initially skeptical about attending dinner with a family we barely knew, had become intrigued after meeting Luca briefly when he picked me up on Friday. "He looks at you like you're the only woman in the world," she'd commented afterward. "It's kind of intense, but nice." Now, as we approached Antonio's brownstone, camera bag slung over my shoulder, I felt a flutter of nerves. "Remember," I told Mia, "his father sometimes gets confused. Just be patient with him." "I will," she promised, adjusting her scarf, a cashmere one that had appeared mysteriously on our doorstep the day after she'd met Luca. Antonio greeted us warmly, embracing me like a long-lost daughter, and immediately taking a shine to Mia, exclaiming over her academic achievements. The house was filled with delicious aromas, and the sound of voices from deeper inside. Come," Antonio urged, leading us through to a large dining room where about a dozen people were gathered. "Everyone, meet Ella and her sister Mia." All conversation ceased as we entered, every eye turning to assess us. I felt Luca move immediately to my side, his hand settling possessively at the small of my back. "This is my cousin Marco and his wife Teresa," Antonio began introductions, gesturing to a couple in their 40s. "My nephew Dominic and his fiancée Sophia." He continued around the room, a dizzying array of family members whose names blurred together. I noticed the calculating looks from the women, the appraising glances from the men. We were being evaluated, judged for worthiness. Luca's grip on my waist tightened almost imperceptibly. "And this," Antonio said finally, "is Luca's godfather, Vincent Calabresi." With a jolt, I recognized the silver-haired man from the restaurant, the one Luca had called a rival. Vincent smiled thinly, taking my hand in his cold grip. "We meet again, Miss Blackwood," he said smoothly. "What a pleasant surprise." Luca's entire body tensed beside me. Uncle Vincent, he acknowledged, his tone carefully neutral. I wasn't expecting you today. Your father insisted, Vincent replied, his gaze never leaving my face. Family occasions and all that. Dinner was a lavish affair, course after course of traditional Italian dishes, wine flowing freely, conversation that alternated between English and Italian. I noticed that despite the apparent conviviality, there were undercurrents of tension, particularly between Luca and Vincent. Several times they exchanged words in rapid Italian that sounded less than friendly. Mia, seated beside Antonio, charmed him completely with her quick wit and genuine interest in his stories. I watched them with a warmth spreading through my chest, realizing how much I'd missed seeing her interact with a grandparent figure. After dinner, as everyone moved to the sitting room for coffee, Vincent cornered me in a moment when Luca had stepped away to take a phone call. You've certainly made an impression on the Ricci men, he observed, swirling brandy in a crystal glass. First Antonio, now Luca. Quite the achievement for a waitress from the wrong side of town. I bristled at his condescension. I don't consider kindness an achievement. Kindness, he repeated with a chuckle. Is that what you think secured your place here? My dear, women have been showing kindness to the Ricci men for generations. Few receive invitations to Sunday dinner. What are you implying? I asked coldly. Merely that Luca is known for his passionate attachments. They burn brightly but tend to extinguish just as quickly. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I would hate to see you or your charming sister disappointed when his attention inevitably wanders. Before I could respond, Luca materialized beside me, his expression thunderous. A word, uncle, he said in a tone that brooked no argument. To me, he added gently, Ella, my father was asking for you. I nodded, relieved to escape Vincent's unsettling presence. As I walked away, I glanced back to see the two men engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion, their voices too low to overhear. Antonio beckoned me to the seat beside him, patting my hand affectionately. Don't mind Vincent, he said, surprising me with his awareness. He and Luca have been at odds since Maria died. Vincent thought he should have more say in Luca's upbringing, in the business. I disagreed. He seems to disapprove of me, I admitted. He disapproves of anything that makes Luca happy, Antonio replied with surprising sharpness. My son has carried too many burdens for too long. You bring light back to his eyes. He squeezed my hand. The token I gave you, it belonged to Maria. I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right person to pass it to. I touched the silver coin, which I now wore on a chain alongside the camera pendant. I'm honored. Honor? Antonio nodded approvingly. That is what the Ricci family values above all. Honor, loyalty, family. His blue eyes, so like Luca's, fixed on me intently. Remember that, cara mia, and you will always find your place with us. Later, as we prepared to leave, Luca pulled me aside in the hallway. I'm sorry about Vincent, he said, his jaw tight with residual anger. He overstepped. What did he say to you? I asked. Nothing worth repeating. He cupped my face in his hands. What matters is this, us. The rest is noise. His kiss was possessive, almost desperate, as if he needed to claim me in the face of whatever threat Vincent represented. When we broke apart, his eyes were dark with emotion. Stay with me tonight, he murmured against my lips. Mia can manage one night alone, he finished. Please, Ella, I need you. The raw vulnerability in his voice made my decision. After arranging for Luca's driver to take Mia home, I went with him to his penthouse, where he loved me with an intensity that left us both breathless and trembling. Afterward, as we lay entwined in the darkness, Luca traced the curve of my shoulder with gentle fingers. I love you, he said quietly, the words hanging in the stillness between us. My heart stuttered in my chest. It was too soon, too fast, and yet, I knew with sudden clarity that I felt the same. I love you too, I whispered back. Luca pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Then marry me. I froze, certain I'd misheard. What? He shifted, leaning up on one elbow to look down at me, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. Marry me, Ella. Be my wife. My partner in everything. Luca, we've known each other less than 2 weeks, I protested, though my pulse was racing. And in that time, I've become more certain of you than anything else in my life. His hand covered mine, bringing it to rest over his heart. I know who I am, what I am. I've never lied to you about that, but with you, I can be more than just the head of the Ricci family. I can be a man who loves, who dreams of a future with someone who sees him. Truly sees him. Tears pricked my eyes at the naked honesty in his voice. What about your world? Your business? The danger? You'll be protected always, you and Mia both. His grip tightened on my hand. I can't promise a normal life, Ella. But I can promise that you'll never want for anything. That you'll be cherished every day, that your sister will have every opportunity. His voice dropped lower, that our children will grow up knowing both strength and tenderness. The mention of children, our children, sent a shock of longing through me so intense it took my breath away. I could see it suddenly, a future with this complicated, dangerous, loving man. A family of our own. Yes, I whispered, the word escaping before doubt could silence it. Yes, I'll marry you. Luca's face transformed with joy, years of tension falling away as he gathered me into his arms, covering my face with kisses. You've made me the happiest man alive, he murmured against my skin. I swear on my life you'll never regret this decision, as he slid a ring onto my finger. A ring he must have been carrying, hoping. I knew that whatever dangers or complications lay ahead, the path forward was with him. In finding Luca, I'd not only secured Mia's future, but discovered a love I never imagined possible. A love worth any risk.